All Mariners podcast. I'm your host today, Evan James, joined by Michael Ahedo and Anders Jorstad. Merely hours ago, the Mariners wrapped up their their final spring training game, falling to the Cincinnati Reds 12-9. We got to see Brendan Williamson and Jake Fraley again, so that was all kinds of fun. But the roster is set, and obviously it includes the big news of the week. You guys ready? Julio has made the team as a starting center fielder, and I want to kick it over to Durs right away because we had talked on this very podcast quite a bit about how the Mariners needed a center fielder, and they got one. They got one, Durs.
Yeah, I was, during all of our hand wringing of the lockout, I don't think we really took this into consideration. And we were all, Seiya Suzuki or like maybe someone like Manuel Margot, like we all had our ideas of who the Mariners could acquire as a center fielder. None of us really considered the fact that they could just go internal for it. I think because so much of the dialogue and discussion around Julio was like when the Mariners call him up, where are they going to find room for him? Because we thought they were going to add a center fielder. It was like, okay, well, you got Haniger and you've got, Lewis and you've got Kelenic, and it's like, where are you going to find room for Julio? And it seems like the simple answer was apparently you just put him in the position that they need help in. Even though they got Jesse Winker, who's really more of a DH. But yeah, I was surprised. I don't think that I considered this as a possibility when the lockout was happening, but it became very obvious this was a possibility pretty quickly when spring training began, and he was just killing it, and they had really nice things to say about him. I still don't think I really expected it to happen until maybe the last week or so, but obviously this is super cool, and we don't have to wait, which is awesome.
Mikey, you've listed a couple of the under 21-year-olds, or I guess 21 and under players who have debuted and kind of the pedigree that it puts Julio in. Tell us a little bit about that and the trajectory that he's on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, so since 1994, I listed off a couple notable 21-year-old or old center fielders or younger. Actually, I don't think I did center fielders. I just did 21-year-olds. But a lot of interesting names. There's Mike Trout. There's Alex Rodriguez. There's Andrew Jones. There's Acuna, Correa. I spelled Machado like the Filipino food. Manny Machado, Juan Soto, J Hay, Bryce Harper, like very, very good players. Obviously, that leaves off like Jared Kelenic, who was one of the worst. Like that span of hitting was one of the worst ever, I think. So obviously, it can go wrong. But I do feel like Julio his projections are better, like for whatever reason. And I would not have thought that this would be the case, but for whatever reason, the projections, I think, like him more than, and I would be interested to find what they thought of Kelenic preseason in 2021, but they seem to really like him. And so he's got a lot of precedence for being very good, and the projections really like him. I'm trying to find, because I don't know if it's updated anywhere. Zips DC, which I think is like Zips depth chart, in terms of, which means like they take depth charts, playing time from Fangraphs. They like him to be, oh, where did it go? He's up there. Like he's really up there right away for center fielders. So kind of like Durs was saying, he immediately slots in as, maybe a top 10 or top 10, 15 center fielder in the game. That's pretty good. So, it could go anywhere. It could be, I wouldn't be that surprised if it was like a Justin Upton type debut. It could also be a Jared Kelenic debut. So I think we should be, go in with expectations that he could struggle, but I really just think that he's going to be pretty good right off the bat.
My question for you guys, is it okay the Mariners didn't go out and acquire I guess they got Winker, but is it okay they didn't acquire a center fielder now knowing that this was maybe this was the plan, but now this is the result?
I still don't like it.
Yeah. What if he didn't hit? What if he had a poor end of spring? They would have sent him down. I kind of think that they wanted to send him down. I think that was sort of their plan. I think he just hit well enough where they couldn't really not. It's kind of tough to say. Like, I was expecting him to get sent down. I had heard that he was getting sent down from a couple different people until the day before. So I really do think it was a bad move. And if he does struggle, who's our center fielder?
So you don't think the Mariners should have
Kyle Lewis.
You don't think the Mariners should have had him on the opening day roster then, Mikey?
Julio?
Yeah.
No, I do.
Okay.
You just figure it out. I mean, like, people talk about, when Kyle Lewis gets back, what are we going to do with him? You find a spot for him. I don't know. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to,
Again, I'm.
It's really not a thing to me.
I really like the idea of the Winker Lewis platoon potentially. If Winker still can't hit lefties, I mean, that's a pretty easy spot for him. I guess probably right now it's going to be a Winker Terens platoon at DH, which is also cool. But yeah, it is a little worrisome that like the backup option now is Billy Hamilton in center field.
Yeah, and realistically, the backup option is not Billy Hamilton. What they're hoping is that everyone is healthy for 2 weeks until Kyle Lewis can play again. And if it's really that short, if it's really that this is the plan for like, less than 30 days, I'm more okay with that. I do agree that an actual center fielder that isn't a rookie and has played in AAA would have been a better plan A than what they've gone with. But I also agree with Mikey that they kind of had their hand forced because Julio just played out of his mind. And for the record, he played out of his mind for the second spring training in a row as a guy who turned 21 4 months ago. So it's like, at a certain point, you just have to give in to the forces of Julio and what he's been doing. But I wanted to stick on the projections here for a minute. Durs, did you have a chance to listen to the podcast that we did a couple days ago for Julio?
Honestly, I listened to like the first 10 minutes, so not all of it.
We talked about the projections. Okay. We talk about the projections quite a bit, and kind of the point that I made was, Mikey, you said, these are Julio's projections. My extrapolation from that is this is how the projection system reads players who have only been successful in AA and have no misses anywhere.
I did hear you mention that part.
This is literally just looking at his AA numbers and saying, what if this, but major leagues, because he has no AAA experience and he hasn't struggled in the majors. And that's a core difference. Jared Kelnick's projections right now are very much between 1 and 2 wins, and on the lower end of that, depending on where you look. And they're not dissimilar in terms of upside, but it has so much less faith in him just because he's actually failed where they could measure it. So it is there, I think it's interesting to see kind of how much it prefers the performance of guys who have not struggled at all, whether or not it's applicable, whether or not we can actually extrapolate anything from his AA numbers. Mikey, how would you say that more intelligently than I'm able to, because this is your wheelhouse?
That's the interesting thing about projections is that most projections, and I think the worst might be ATC, is they're just trying to catch, those 50th percentile outcomes. That's what they're trying to capture. They're not really worried about like capturing everyone. They just want to be, it feels like, and not only does it feel like, but it is that they're trying to limit the amount in which they're wrong. And so what the projections don't know, and what they could never know, is that Kelnick did a lot of, he did a lot of tinkering. He struggled for the first time in his life. And I really think that he was just in the thick of it last year. And there's so much mentally that goes on, and so much that he was tinkering with that he never had a chance to really hit. And so by the end of the season, he looked really good. End of spring, he's looked really good as well. I'm still not in love with the stance that he's going with right now. I liked his end of 2021 stance. I thought that was seemed like the best fit for him. But Um, I tend to not really love projections in general for rookies. I was listening to Eno a while ago, and because rookies are really tough to project, they talked about how if you just throw like a league average projection on a rookie, you'll probably do better than what a lot of the projection systems do. Like they're that it's that tough. Um, with that said, I do like what I think about Julio. ATC, which is like an aggregate projection system. So it basically takes each projection system and it says, hey, what do you do best? And it takes what it likes from different projection systems. So it is really good at capturing those 50th percentile outcomes. It likes Julio for 2.6 WAR in 98 games and
I feel like
413 PAs.
that's very reasonable compared to some of the other things I've heard. I very much could buy into that compared to the 4 or 5 win stuff.
Whereas the Bat X, which I generally tend to like the most on the hitting side, because I believe it's the only one that takes into account StatCast data, and if not, it does it the best. It likes him for 1.7 more over the same exact kind of playing time. So those are a couple, takes on the situation.
Yeah, I kind of expect that Jared Kelenic is going to have a better season war-wise than Julio, just because he's already had to go through those growing pains. And I mean, there's a complete possibility that Julio never does. There are some players that are just like so amazing off the rip, like Acuna and Soto, like you mentioned. Those two guys didn't really have those growing pains. I don't think Julio is. There's a lot of differences between Julio and Soto for sure. And there are some differences between him and Acuna that I don't know for sure if he's going to be that kind of a player. I kind of expect him to be like a 255 hitter with like 20 to 25 homers. Maybe like a 2 WAR player, and I think that'll be fine. I think there might be some people that freak out that say, "Oh my God, like where's the superstar we were promised?" Especially if the Mariners like don't make the playoffs this year. But I think that will be unfounded. In total, I think that we expect too much of rookies, and then we change our opinions on them really quickly when they don't meet up to those lofty expectations. Like Kelenic is a great example of that. But even to a lesser extent, you had guys like Jaron Duran with the Red Sox, who was like the talk of Boston when he was killing it in AAA, and now nobody even mentions his name anymore because he hit 200 for like 2 months. So I'm kind of baking that into my expectations for Julio, that he's going to struggle, and I'm already coming to terms with that being okay.
So this year, and I might not be running this query correctly, what would y'all say was the WRC plus for 21-year-olds and younger?
Last year,
88.
72.
It was 88.
Oh, whoa!
That's pretty wild, Evan. I guess
I'm not the insider here. Just for the record, I have the least baseball cloud of these three people, the least inside knowledge.
I mean,
so I'll take it
I
to the
don't.
bank.
Yeah, whatever. It is like it does really oscillate, but that's basically because in the past decade you've had guys that are on that list that I rattled off, like Trout and whoever else. And part of that's because Kelenic was one of those players. You said this was
the last 10 years?
That was 2021.
Okay.
I'm looking at since 2010. It goes anywhere from 88 to 122 WRC plus.
That must have been like the Acuna,
so essentially
Acuna Soto year, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2012. So I think that's after Trout.
Posey?
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, it might be Posey.
Posey? No, right? He was before. I don't know.
2012 feels like such a long time ago, even if it wasn't.
Yeah, no kidding. I don't know how to not lump the or split the seasons, but it's I mean this is why it's so hard to project rookies. It's a clusterfuck. So I kind of think just prepare for league average. I think it's a good rule of thumb. But we're talking about a potentially generational player here. So.
I think adding a league average player is a good thing, even if that's all he is, right? Like, if the Mariners had signed Seiya Suzuki, I think that's like a reasonable expectation for what Suzuki is going to be.
Mm-hmm. And to keep in mind, Seiya is not a true center fielder, so Seiya would have meant that we were playing Hamilton or Kelnick or whoever
Julio.
else in center, anyways. Yeah,
I mean,
or Julio.
Seiya may have been the no Winker timeline. I'm guessing that the Winker Suarez thing, I'm guessing those two things happened once the Mariners realized they were priced out of everybody free agent wise.
Well, it coincided with the news that Seiya in particular was signing. That happened days/hours before they did the Winker trade. And so we know for a fact they were out on him at that point.
Well, and Jerry had mentioned that they had gone down several conversations with player agents, and he said they went down several dead ends, I think is what he said, which sounds to me like he talked to Story and Bryant and realized that they were priced out of what the Mariners were willing to spend, at least, and then he probably went to get Winker and Suarez.
I kind of wonder how much of part of it was third base with Story, but I wonder if he didn't want to get vaccinated.
Well, he got vaccinated for Boston.
Yeah,
that was part of the deal.
But that's I do feel like that's different,
Yeah, I think that like the Mariners just don't have that. They're not going to get the benefit of the doubt from guys, and we may have talked about this before, but the Mariners are not going to get the benefit of the doubt from like a Story the same way that Boston is. Like, he's going to go to Boston because he knows that they're already good. He knows that they're going to win. The Mariners have to be the ones to make a really aggressive push into the postseason or sign a big player first. So they have to be the ones to splash big on Bryant before they can convince somebody to take a discount to come play for them. And then you end up like the Padres, who signed Eric Hosmer to get Machado and everybody else. And now they're like, please, somebody take Hosmer off our hands.
Who's the guy who wrote about the Mariners who went and worked for the Padres? That's
Dave
not
Cameron.
Jeff, right? That's somebody else.
Dave Cameron, yeah.
I remember because they signed Hosmer like moments after that, and I remember thinking about it and being like, it's weird that they started off Dave Cameron's tenure with such a bad decision, but
so
that's really worked out.
It is interesting. I think he actually was all right with that deal, if I remember correctly, or at least from what I've heard.
I think it was the
deal is not an albatross the day it was signed. There was a possibility that he was worth that at a market rate. It was unlikely, but it hasn't it hasn't panned out.
I think it was the Tipping Pitches guys who tweeted that like Preller is who everybody thinks Jerry Dipoto is, which is kind of true. Like
Preller,
like everybody thinks Jerry Dipoto is like this crazy transactor, but really that's AJ Preller. Dipoto was a crazy transactor for like a season and a half, and then he basically I don't know the stats, but it seems like he's been very league average in terms of number of transactions in the last 3-4 years. And certainly he has not been making big splash trades or big free agent signings. He's mostly been
Preller did the craziest trade of all time, which was the Kemp deal. That entire season of Padres baseball is like one of the outliers of the weirdest seasons in recent memory, for sure.
Yeah, Preller. I don't think Preller's a good GM. I just think he's an active one. And
he's not.
I mean, the Mariners. There's so many Mariners fans that like want what the Padres are doing, but the Padres made a crap ton of moves and then finished like well below 500 last year. And I think they're probably going to be good this year, but there's certainly no guarantee they're making the playoffs with that division.
They're also spending all their money
and prospects.
Like they're tied down on a lot of players for a long time. Machado and Tatis, and I like those players. I'd be happy to have them signed in Seattle, but they are dug in a way the Mariners currently are not. And as much as I despise the term payroll flexibility, and it gives me hives to say that, and I winced when I heard it the day after Chris Bryant signed with the Rockies. Jerry Dipoto got on the radio and he was like, yeah, we have such great payroll flexibility now. It's just
you were the one person who was the most upset the Mariners didn't make that deal.
I told you that I was only going to despair one single time this offseason. It was when the Mariners didn't sign Chris Bryant, and I kept to it. And I was very disparaged
Okay,
that day. But
so
everybody gets a
wait, so
mulligan.
you would have given him that contract?
It's not.
for Seattle.
I am aware that is a bad contract. I'm not under the influence that it's a good deal for anyone. But the Seattle is paying nobody anything. Like they could have paid him that.
So I want you to say that you would have given him what you're describing as a bad
I would have
contract.
given Chris Bryant $181 million of John Stanton's money. No question. No question.
It's for like 8 years or something.
I know, but here was the point I made then. If the Mariners are not good, if the Mariners don't make the playoffs and nothing works out in a 3-year time frame, we're going to be redoing all of this anyway. So I agree. The last 5 years of the contract is a bad idea. But we're in a window where we have to maximize what's in front of us. And if we don't, it's not going to matter. Really? Somebody else is going to be making those calls.
Here's the thing. Zips likes him for 3.1 WAR this year, which is not that great. 2.9 WAR the next year, which is pretty much the same, and 2.3 WAR the next year. Already 3 years into an 8-year deal, he's posting 2.3 WAR a season. That's like role player, like Abe Toro can do that.
If Abe Toro
and
does
for the record,
that,
the Bat X likes him for like 2.9 this year. ATC 2.3.
Yeah, I really soured on Bryant once I saw those projections after he signed that contract. The thing is that, like,
look, I would have signed him, but not for that.
I disagree with your assessment that the Mariners have to win these next 3 years or they're screwed. I certainly don't think that's true, especially if they manage to extend Julio and or Kelenic, which I think is totally plausible. The Mariners still have a lot of guys that are going to come up and help the team out, the major league team out in the next couple of years, and they have payroll flexibility, which they'll never use.
Stop saying that word.
See, but this is the problem now. We do have a good team. We have a very good team. We also have about $30 million we haven't spent on anybody. And if it has to be Chris Bryant who gets that money, at least he's like a above average player. We could do worse.
I really was hoping.
No, you go, Durs.
I was gonna say I was really hoping they'd just take on Hosmer and get like Chris Paddock or something, or Dinelson Lamet.
They should. I think that you can make this assessment post deadline. I think that's fair. But there's a lot of money that's going to be moved around then, and I think if the Mariners feel like they're close enough, they will maybe take on a bad contract and a good player or something like that.
They could go back to the Reds again.
So I think it'll be fair.
They could go back to the Reds and say, we'll take Moustakas if you give us Molly.
I would love that. I would love that so much. But are they going to do that with the rotation that they have now? Like, who gets bumped?
Well, I mean, you really think that all those guys are going to be healthy in July? I mean, we could be dealing with like Tommy Malone, who already left the team in that spot.
I mean, for the record, it shouldn't matter. Like, I don't know, push Flexen out of the rotation.
Well, yeah, Flexen could suck. Like, we are not considering the possibility that Flexen could suck.
I don't think Flexen's going to suck. I really don't. I think he's going to be exactly like last year. No better, no worse. Pretty much the same dude. If he's a 3-win starting pitcher in 200 innings or whatever, like, that's fine. He can be a number 3, number 4.
Yeah, that's more than fine. Yeah, I'll take that.
That's what he did last year, right? He had three wins last year, I want to say, and he was the best pitcher on the team by WAR, but like Logan was clearly superior on a rate basis towards the end of the season. Yeah, let's talk actually about Gilbert, since I just mentioned him, because Mikey wrote up Logan a little bit. Logan has tweaked his repertoire, shall we say, sharpened up some of the breaking pitches. I was listening to Shannon filled in on 710 a lot, not this week, but last week. Just kind of filling in a ton of details while a couple of the other people who normally do the show are gone. And she had a lot of interesting things to say about Cal, but about Logan in particular. She said that, he's really looking like a guy who's going to have a sophomore bump, so to speak, a sophomore boom instead of a bust. And Mikey wrote a little bit about this. So tell us about your article, Mikey.
That was my deck. That was what I said. I said Logan Gilbert will look to enjoy the sophomore bump. I've been plagiarized. So yeah, I mean, we've talked, and a lot of it is internally, but a lot just about Logan Gilbert and the player that he is. I mean, I know Joe Doyle thinks that he has like a 60 to 70 grade fastball. I've been a little lower on it. It's hard to call it a 50 grade, like an average fastball, when he's, posting the strike percentages that he has with it. But the thing is that it hasn't turned into whiffs. He hasn't whiffed as many hitters as you would think when he was coming up from the minor leagues. Everyone said, "Oh, he has, he releases the ball 7.5 feet in front of the plate. It feels like he's reaching out and dropping the ball in the catcher's mitt." He just hasn't converted, fastballs into swinging strikes, which, generally speaking, if you throw a good fastball like Gilbert's, it should. And so we've all kind of had different takes on it. John wrote about how he thinks his fastball is kind of underrated at this point and how he gets a lot of foul balls. Kate talked about how he needed to find his curveball. I really liked his changeup from last year, but he never really threw it. And then come to find out, in his first, I believe, spring training outing, he came out and his fastball looked good, but he looked different. He was throwing, something more of like a hard slider, like a cutter slider hybrid that was about like high 80s. The curveball is a lot firmer, which is a really good thing because he was throwing it like 74 last year, and you're not going to get whiffs with a curveball like that unless it's like a Rich Hill curveball, and his isn't a Rich Hill curveball. And then his changeup was firmer too. And all of these things, all of his pitches in terms of, like if you look at like Eno Saris' stuff plus, I bet all of his pitches will tick up in terms of stuff. But more importantly, they're like, again, to speak that language, their location plus should tick up significantly because last year, especially towards the end of the year, he was throwing like 70% fastballs at some point. And if you're a pitcher, or rather if you're a hitter, you just have to look fastball and that's it. Like, look fastball, and if it's anything else, just take it. So not only has his stuff ticked up, but the tighter shape on everything should portend more competitive pitches. And the more that he can just be in and around the zone with his pitches, the more that hitters are going to have to look for other things. So at the end of the day, I think that this is, if you want to talk about floor and ceiling, I think that this is the best thing for his floor because, you're going from being able to throw one, maybe two pitches in any given outing to, 2 to 4. Yeah, I mean, they're all like the slider from last year was pretty meh. It was like just he located it the best. The changeup I really loved, but he couldn't locate it at all. The curveball, I mean, I didn't really like it, and he couldn't really locate it. So I'm really excited about what it looks like for him to mix all these pitches. I still haven't seen as much as I'd like to see in terms of him being able to reliably locate all of these. I think it was against the Royals that he really struggled. But part of that I think is he's not going with a regular season, kind of sequence in terms of what he's throwing. He was really trying to, I think, get that feel for those pitches, and it's practice. And so I really do think that this is going to be more of a breakout year for him. And I was really, by the end of last year, like pretty down on him. I thought he was maybe a number 3, number 4, pitcher. And now I'm back to kind of being excited about him and thinking, he's got that number 2 upside.
Did
That was a lot, by the
didn't
way.
he didn't he spend time with Jacob deGrom this last offseason too, and like change of grip completely?
Yes,
Yeah.
Shannon mentioned that.
I don't know if that's where he got the grip from. But he did talk about, just like watching him pitch. And one thing that he talked about, which again makes me feel good about where he's going to be locating pitches, was he talked about everything that DeGrom does. He's working off of, I don't remember his verbiage, but basically working like glove side, and everything works off of, being able to spot pitches on the glove side of the plate. And it really sounds like, if he can do that, he should be able to really work with all four pitches. So it sounds like that's a priority for him, and I think that's really encouraging.
My read on Gilbert from last year is that part of the reason he wasn't throwing the off-speed stuff is because he just wasn't comfortable yet. And that's normal. When a starting pitcher comes up, there's an adjustment. There's, a time period where they're not mixing their pitches like they're capable of, or throwing them maybe like in the correct balance that will make them most effective, because they're just throwing whatever they feel like they can get strikes with. You see that with pitchers who are experienced anyway, and they have an off day. Sometimes they're not able to throw a certain pitch over. I think Gilbert did not trust his stuff last year in a big way. And, I think he would be the first to say that. I didn't trust my curveball. I didn't trust the changeup. I just threw fastballs. And that's not the guy that was dominant in the minor leagues. The guy that was dominant in the minor leagues was mixing his pitches. And he had obviously, periods where he was just blowing the fastball by lower minor league hitters. But the guy who dominated Double-A and really made a name for himself kind of in that era was a guy who had 3+ pitches or something close to it. And I'm interested to see if he can get back to that. But I want to ask Durs first about Mariners have an exciting new addition to the rotation. Somebody they got for Taylor Williams after he gave up a grand slam and blew a game for the Mariners. They somehow managed to trade him for a player to be named later, who would become stalwart for the Mariners rotation 2022, Matt Brash. Durs, how excited are you to see Matt Brash? How fun is it to just have a fresh kid like this in the rotation? And what does an actual season from him look like? Because I think that there's a lot of answers to that question.
Yeah, I watched his most recent start in spring training, and I was quite impressed because it was pretty obvious he did not have his best stuff. But he still managed to have a really good outing. I think he allowed that one home run, and that was pretty much it. What was it, the Brewers he was pitching against? So I think, and that was the start that sealed his rotation spot. And I think that he did well to, get deep into that game, or at least, deeper than like an opener would. I think there's still some concern about that. But I'm excited to see them give him a chance. And I think that he pretty much has nothing left to prove in the minor leagues. So, if he can improve his command enough and he can develop a third pitch, which are both really tall tasks, I mean, he could be a really, really, really good starting pitcher. I still hold the concern that many do that he's probably more of a reliever. But one thing that I think that they should do is piggyback him with Justice Sheffield to start off the season. And the reason being, Mikey is despairing right now of me saying this, but you cannot find two more different looks to give a team than Brash and Sheffield. Righty, lefty, soft tosser, hard thrower, command.
Some would say good and bad.
Command in theory from Justice, and, just stuff from Brash. While they build Brash up, and maybe between those two guys you can get through 7 innings in a start. I think that would be a good idea for the Mariners to try to work Brash in. I mean, Sheffield's going to be on the roster, Mikey. I'm sorry, so they're going to have to do something with him. And if he's throwing 3 innings on the back of a Brash start, I don't know if that's the roster is at 28 players when you account for the injured list, on the team, and he's still there.
Give me 20 minutes. I got something I gotta go do. Oh man, yeah. I guess he's on roster resource, and he is on the list that they released. I would rather see Tommy Malone. Maybe, I don't know if that's true.
Well, Malone is gone. Yeah, he opted out. He opted out after like a week on the squad.
Good God.
They should
Okay,
have signed
well,
Tyler Anderson. That would be a good piggyback for
They
Brash.
should have
it
signed
would be
Tyler.
perfect. I don't know why the Dodgers did it. Do we think the Dodgers aren't a good team? Like, if the Dodgers can
If
do
Andrew
it with
Friedman
their
thought that was a good
rotation,
idea, it probably was a good idea.
I
Exactly.
just
Like
don't
clearly.
understand. I don't
Clearly.
understand. But I mean, yeah, sure, that's fine. I wouldn't protest that.
Mikey, let me ask
Yeah.
you this. So some of the concern around Matt Brash has to do with whether or not he's a reliever or a starter. Is that because he doesn't have the durability to last as a starter, or is it because his repertoire is not refined to the point where he is going to be able to throw enough strikes to last? Because I'm unclear a lot of times when I'm reading stuff about him. Some people are saying he's going to fatigue and like not be able to make it through 3 or 4 innings. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing a guy who might be the Bedard archetype and throw 85 pitches in 3 innings and need to get pulled. What's your read kind of on Matt Brash and his prospects in the starting rotation?
I think it's kind of a mix of things. I think it's that he's really worked on his delivery and honestly, I haven't looked at old video to know, but he has limited the amount of effort. And so, that makes him more likely,
The delivery does look more
that makes it
natural,
seem more,
like more of a big league starter.
yeah, but it's certainly not
No.
effortless. And so I think that he's got some effort in there. I'm trying to find what day he pitched, because I'd like to see how his velocity trended over, the course of the outing. I think it's Man King will just not leave me alone. This is my cat if you're not watching on video. I think it's partially a durability thing. It's partially, a command thing is one of the biggest things. He's gotten to the point where his command is doable, it's workable. But in his last outing, he didn't look good. Like, he did look good, but he looked pretty, like, he struggled a lot during some points of the game. So to me, if you ask me, he's a multi-inning, high leverage, it's kind of the thing where every time you have Ty France or Abe Toro, it's, they could be Ben Zobrist. So I'm kind of going to do that thing, but like kind of the Andrew Miller role, the fireman, but like multiple innings.
It would be more like the Davinsky, wouldn't it? Because Miller was a lefty.
Yeah, I like that more, actually. When Davinsky was good.
Yes. That one year where he was like,
and Davinsky had, his delivery, it was just, oh man, I don't know that was ever going to work. But he could make that work. He's got the fastball. He's got, I would call it easily a top 10 slider in MLB, and he's got a changeup that works too. So, I mean, he could do 2-3, innings. It's just, that's not all that common. I don't know. There's Dinelson Lamet, who I think is a pretty decent comp, because he throws one pitch that's really good and then a sinker with it. Oh, and the good pitch is a slider, and doesn't have good command.
But he's going back to the bullpen now.
Yeah, but that's because it's a pod. They have 7 good. I don't know if I'd call them good. They have 7, relievers starters I could pitch for the Mariners. So they could probably just replace our rotation. So yeah, I think I don't know. That's kind of what I oftentimes think of, is like, if Dinelson Lamet can start, and I do think he's a top 25 starter, someone like Brett, I almost said Brat Mashed.
Yes.
That's an accident. Don't tell Matthew. Then I kind of think guys like Brash should be able to do it, but yeah, he smells like a really elite reliever to me.
You know who made it work with Brash's repertoire, although he obviously had much better command and control even early on, is Pineda. Was essentially a two-pitch guy once upon a time. He's not a similar archetype to Matt Brash in terms of like what we should expect. Because again, he could command it, and Pineda won Rookie of the Year that year. Do I remember
He
that
was an
correctly?
all-star. I don't know if he won Rookie of the Year.
Okay. And we traded him for Jesus Montero, so
I was so excited about
good
that trade
decisions.
when it happened.
In all fairness, it didn't work out really for anybody. He pitched a little bit in New York, but it never quite worked out. I think he's best known in New York for the pine tar incident, probably, right? So hey, nobody's happy. But Matt Brash is exciting, and there are just a couple really young, super green, zero experience kids on this team. And when we talk about roster depth, I know it makes all of us a little uncomfortable and wince a little bit when we look and we see guys like that we are counting on. You know what I mean? For the Mariners to be good, we need Jared Kelenic, who is 22, Julio Rodriguez, who is 21, and Matt Brash, who has never thrown a pitch in AAA, to be good. That's asking a lot of three players who are very young
Evan, do you
and
think
very
that
inexperienced.
maybe that's a good idea or a good reason why the Mariners didn't sign Chris Bryant, who's going to be bad in 2 years?
Let me say this about Chris Bryant. I think those projections are a little low on him. Not way low. Like, I think he had 4.1 WAR last year. Am I wrong about that? I'm not going to pull it up. I think he had about 4 wins last year. I think you could buy him as a 4-win player in Colorado in the short term. 2 years, 3 years. I understand not wanting to pay him in year 7 of that deal for $30 million for old man Chris Bryant. I get it. I hear it. But I would like a ring in between now and then, frankly, is sort of my opinion on that, right? Like, hey, maybe you don't like how I would spend the Mariners' money, but I would like a ring. I would like a ring because I haven't gotten to feel what that's like other than the Seahawks.
I think
obviously.
the issue is that your way of spending would prohibit them from getting said ring because they wouldn't ever spend ever again for the next 10
I think-
years.
Well,
we
they've
just got
opted not
over
to spend
this.
now, even without the contract. So
We just got out of this situation.
I know.
I think
I know. I understand.
I would have given the Chris Bryant contract to Trevor Story.
Interesting.
I think I would have too. Yeah, he's 29. That's man, he'd be 37 at the end though.
See,
fuck it. Who cares?
There just isn't a way to sign a star player and not have the contract suck in the back half.
Oh yeah,
like there just isn't. Even like
Cruz somehow.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing about that. Let's talk about a deal that was panned by the analytical community as being a stupid idea. So, like, we're all sitting here like, Chris Bryant is a bad idea. We don't know Chris Bryant is not Nelson Cruz. We're pretty sure. We're pretty reasonably sure he's not. But, like, it's just one of those things. We talked about this before. Like, a season in a game in any individual event is a roll of the dice. Nelson Cruz happened to be the exception to a lot of rules, happened to be a guy who had a very late career resurgence, whatever you want to call it, happened to be the best contract Zach Zorenzik ever signed, among other things.
Signed a 2-year deal at age 42.
My God. Good for Nelson, man. Good for
did he get a 2-year deal?
Yeah.
He just got 2 years?
He deserved it. He played very well last year. There's not
42?
really any evidence of him slowing down.
Yes, Mikey.
He is not 42.
Okay, hold on. Let me pull
old man.
I'm pretty sure this is his
I think
age
he's actually
41.
Season.
Hold on.
Yeah. That sounds
Holy
right.
fucking shit. Yeah, he turns 42 in July. Yeah. What the fuck?
He's going to be 44
and
at
he's
the end
still
of the
good.
deal.
He's still really good. He's
I
basically Ty France still. Anyways.
He's better than Ty France.
So the Nelson Cruz contract being an outlier. Here's what I will say. The Robinson Cano deal would not have ended well for the Mariners, and the only reason we got out of that contract was because the Mets are a trash fire, and his agent happened to be the GM who was willing to do us a favor. And I agree that it is not a good idea for us to sign contracts like that in the future, because getting out of that required us hoodwinking somebody, and I don't believe that is a good policy.
Honestly, that whole combination of moves is like the greatest thing to ever happen to the Mariners in the last 10 years for sure. Is signing Cano to that massive deal, getting him to come play here, and then just dumping the back half of his deal onto someone else for their top prospect.
So wild.
That was the best move Jerry ever made. So that's probably one of the best things. The other best deal is the Cliff Lee trade.
Oh, that was
of the Mariners' recent history.
Well, they got like 2.5 really good months and then traded him for nothing that ended up mattering. Because they got
but they traded nothing that mattered, like less that mattered.
Yeah, Philippe Amont. Anyone?
Or oh my god. Yeah, right? Like nothing.
I think he pitched like three major league games, something like that. Like a total of 7 or 8
We were
innings.
stuck with 3 years of Justin Smoke's mediocrity, and such is life.
Ugh. Did we trade him to the Rangers?
Lee, yeah.
That must have been how we got Smoke, because he was a Ranger.
We got a package of dudes, most of whom were really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we got during that whole era, there were all these weird Zorenzik trades where we got Gutierrez and Jason Vargas.
We actually got a really good package when we traded Doug Fister. It's just that none of the top prospects we got panned out. But I remember we got some pretty good guys for him. But
Casper Wells and
Francisco Martinez was the big one. He was a third base prospect who ended up being trash. But
what?
Yeah,
I don't remember this.
Was that also who was the relief pitcher we got?
Chance Ruffin.
Chance Ruffin. Okay.
And we got Furbush.
Why do you remember this?
Furbush was the fourth player.
Why do you? Furbush. Yeah, Furbush for Fister. It's my favorite trade ever.
And then we didn't trade Furbush for
Justin Upton,
Jackie Bradley Jr.
or Justin Upton.
Right, that was the deal.
Well, Furbush was supposed to be in the Upton trade that Upton turned down too. It was gonna be, Nick Franklin, Taiwan Walker, Charlie Furbush, and I forget who the fourth player was.
For Justin Upton?
Yes.
I feel like Zorenzik would have made that trade in a heartbeat, and I'm so glad he didn't.
He did make that trade. Justin Upton said no.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm glad that there was an adult in the room not to let him have that. Because Justin Upton, by the way, released by the Angels with basically $30 million remaining on his contract.
Yeah,
they are
crazy.
Doing so well.
We do have an outline to get to.
I'm taking this stuff off.
As much as I'd like to remember some guys.
Okay. Let's talk about George Kirby real quick, because Kirby lost the rotation spot essentially to Matt Brash. I think that George Kirby is a much better candidate to stick in the rotation. He has a much more refined repertoire overall. Throws very effortlessly, 97, 98 miles per hour, which is great. He's famous for command. I want to say his rookie year, he walked like 6 people over a lot of innings. I don't actually remember the exact count, but like he basically didn't walk anybody. Did the little Cliff Lee thing in the minor leagues. When did you guys think he's coming up, and what does he look like when he gets here? Because much like Gilbert, I think he is a player who might require an adjustment when he gets here in terms of pitch mix and what he's comfortable throwing.
We all know Mikey is the most qualified.
True.
I actually think that's kind of an interesting, not comp per se, but we talk a lot about the fastball. Joe came on and we talked about the fastball shape, which is kind of generic. I mean, he might be able to kind of gas past it. But his secondaries aren't. I mean, I think that, if you ask 3 people, they'll give you 3 different answers. None of them are really developed to where he has like a clear cut, secondary weapon to me. So I don't know. I do think he's going to kind of struggle, but in a much different way. I think, unlike Gilbert, I think he has better feel for his pitches and he has, elite command. So he'll be able to lean on that. But I think it's not going to look sexy at times. So I think the 2 questions I have for him are, how much is he going to be able to gas past those concerns in terms of fastball shape, and what do those secondaries look like?
Yeah, I'm excited for him, honestly. I think that we're probably going to see a lot of him. I expect him to be up pretty soon. like, as soon as there's an injury, because who else are they going to call up? I don't want to think about it.
Tommy Malone.
He's gone. Literally,
They'll bring him back.
Literally, Darren McCacken is starting opening day in Tacoma. So
Mikey.
So George Kirby's probably coming up pretty soon, and I
never want to hear about Darren McCacken ever again.
Struck out 0 Rockies. Let it be remembered.
God, was it 0?
Yes, it was 0.
That's so bad.
I think he's gonna be up for a while. I think he's probably gonna have like a Logan Gilbert-esque season, which will be like really good at times. Where he'll remember Gilbert had that really good start in New York. I feel like Kirby might have a start or two like that, where you're like, oh, this kid's really good. But on the aggregate, he might be pretty ordinary, because I think Gilbert was like pretty much exactly league average on the aggregate. That's kind of what I expect from Kirby. I agree that it's gonna come differently. I think he just might get lit up at times. Like, I don't think he's gonna walk the world. I just think he's gonna get homered against 3 times if he finds too much of the zone. Or
I mean, Bieber kind of did.
Yeah.
Who's sort of a comp. Bieber's fastball, it's different. I mean, plus command or /plus command. But I think Bieber's secondaries were better coming out as opposed to Kirby. And Bieber's probably never thrown a ball as hard as in his life as Kirby's sitting right now.
I'm going to take us off the rails again. My dream is that the Guardians are really bad and the Mariners are good, and we trade for Bieber at the deadline.
That is also my wet dream. Yeah.
For the record, off the rails on this, my dream of this caliber happens to be that Minnesota is out of it and that we go get Sonny Gray and Carlos Correa wants out.
Carlos Correa wanting out that soon?
He's on a 3-year deal. Realistically, he can go if they wanted to move him or whatever. For the record, this is entirely separate. That deal he signed is weird, and there are literally conspiracy theories around it and why he signed a short deal. The actual thing I've heard is that he's under some kind of... He switched management. So earlier this offseason, he switched management from, I want to say Excel Sports Agency to the Boris Corporation. The theory is that they wanted him to sign a shorter contract because he's still... given the timing of the collective bargaining agreement and when he was still under contract with the old agency, owes them the money, essentially, his old agency, for at least a season or two, and he isn't fully able to pay Boris yet. So what Boris wanted to do is get him signed to a shorter contract, wait till he can get out of it, and then sign him for another one in a couple of years. Is that true? I don't know. But I like to think it is, because it means that he maybe doesn't stick around in Minnesota. And, hey, we maybe don't have a third baseman. So
it's such a weird spot for him, and I can't believe Houston didn't get one of the big shortstops. That's mind-boggling to me, but I digress. Anyway, Bieber being a comp for Kirby. You were saying, Mikey?
Oh, fuck if I know. I don't know. I mean, Bieber was all right, in his rookie season. He'll throw more innings, but I don't know. He's in some ways kind of similar to today, where he got hit hard, but didn't give up too many homers. He barely walked anyone, but didn't strike out guys like he's doing now. Just in looking at Fangraphs, they thought he was a 45 future value, with an average fastball, average slider, plus curveball, average changeup, plus command. I mean, that's kind of what Kirby was. That's probably how I would have described him. It's just that they're different now. So I don't know. It's mostly just saying that I think he's going to be solid, but unexceptional.
In the interest of time, let's close on 3 players. Let's do Matt Festa, Luis Torrens. We can do a quick thing on Abe Toro, and we should talk about Jared, because Jared just wrapped up a pretty good spring. So let's do Jared first, because we were talking about the kids at the top. Jared closes out spring training with a 265. Oh my gosh, I just moved it. 265, I want to say 365, and then a 550 stat line. perfectly acceptable. Yeah, there was some concern over some of his earlier spring training performances, but it sure seems like he's rounded into form, hit home runs on 3 consecutive days, looks pretty locked in, hung out with Mark McGwire over the offseason, which is weird for all of us, but I guess good for his hitting. Yeah, Durs, what do you think? We talked. Here's the thing. You and I believe only one other person on the Lookout Landing staff who did the prediction sheet had Jared ahead of Julio for WAR this year.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I looked at that specifically. I was like kind of curious because, we talked about the projections and how this all shades our impression of people. I think he's going to do better than Julio this year, and I think that he can reach that ceiling. What do you think that's the whole season looks like from him in terms of a result at the end?
I think he's going to be a firmly above average player. I don't think he's going to be like a star. I think he might be somewhere. I kind of wonder if he follows like the Christian Yelich trajectory, where like Yelich was like, a good player for the Marlins for a few years and then like really broke out when he went to the Brewers, became like an actual all-star, like MVP caliber player. I kind of wonder if that's a similar trajectory we might see from Kelnick in terms of like, he might be like really good for a couple of years and then have like a later breakout. That's kind of what I'm expecting. So I think he'll be, like a 3 to 3.5 win player, and he'll probably be one of the Mariners' 4 most valuable players in terms of WAR. And I think people are underestimating him. I've drafted him in like all my fantasy baseball leagues because nobody believes in him. Everybody's super afraid of his year last year, and everyone likes a shiny new toy. And they quickly ditch the one that has a little bit of stain on it. So they've quickly ditched Kelnick for Julio, and I think you can have both. I think that Kelnick will still be a very good player. So I'm very excited for him. I think that his value's decreased a little bit in left field because obviously it's a easier spot to defend, but I think he's a better left fielder than he is a center fielder. I just don't know if he's going to be as exciting of a player profile. It really necessitates that his bat be like special if he's going to play in left field.
I mean, in that way, I think he's more valuable. I would rather a player play a good left field than a potentially terrible center field. So you think he's a 3.5 WAR player this year?
Yes,
I do too.
I would take the under, but it's certainly possible. Like I think it's more likely than people think. And if you look at his projections, like the projections think he's going to play center field. He's not. So, all of them have him short of 2. I think they're all around 2 if they know that he's in left field. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, they think average bat and good defense in left field for most games that's going to get you, 2.5 WAR.
yeah.
So I don't think y'all are far off.
I'd
Just he has to hit well.
I'd peg him to like a 115 to 120 WRC plus in that range somewhere, kind of like the Mitch Haniger range, I guess. Or Haniger was a little bit above that, but anyway.
The projections have him at about a 230 average and about a 100 to 105 WRC plus. So yeah, when we say 110, 115, that is better for sure. All right. Let's talk Luis Torrens, because I think he has one of the weirder fits on the team just in terms of his role, his roster spot. He's kind of the most fungible in that I could see him not being with the team or having a greatly reduced role within several weeks, depending on his performance, but he's really hit well all spring. I don't have a good read on the defense at catcher. I'm generally of the belief that guys don't make a leap from like a solidly below average defensive catcher to a positive one over one off season. Although Omar Narvaez has done everything he possibly can to make me look stupid thinking that. But what do you guys think? Because this is probably the one that I'm the most different on in terms of my opinion of any player on the Mariners with the slack and with Lookout Landing in general. It seems like there's a lot of optimism about Torrens, and I'm not entirely sure if I know where it comes from. So tell me.
I just think that his bat is like pretty decent, and I think that there's room for growth. I don't know if he's like a stellar defensive catcher, but with the robo umps likely coming, I don't know if it matters. If he can just keep the ball in front of him, and if he can, become a reliable bat, we're talking like even 105 to 110 WRC plus, like I don't see it to be far off for him to be a top 10 catcher in baseball. Like that's a very low bar to clear compared to what we expect. Okay,
You and Kate have both now made this prediction.
Mikey, who would you? I think it's hard to ask you in the fly to name 10 catchers that are better, but like that are
name 10 catchers.
Yeah, I'm not going to make you name 10 catchers, but I would say the 10th catcher is probably something in the range of like a Mitch Garver.
It's so funny because there are only 2 qualified catchers. It's such a clusterfuck nowadays.
Yeah, because it's like goalkeepers in hockey where nobody plays more than 60% of games.
Okay. Let's see. We'll go by WAR.
Okay.
Top 10. So you're saying, if we're talking in the context of last year, you're saying that he can clear 2.6 WAR.
maybe I'd readjust that. I think he can clear 2 WAR. I think he can maybe reach 2.5, but I think that 2 is like maybe a reasonable expectation.
So you're still into a top half.
Yeah.
Catcher.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
What about like Tyler Stevenson? He has a 110 WRC plus. He's worth 2 WAR in 402 plate appearances. That seems totally feasible to me in terms of like what a good version of Turin's working out could be. And I think one of the disagreements I've had about him as a player is twofold. One is that if he is a true talent, 110 to 115 WRC plus, 15% better than league average hitter, he's a dynamite catcher, but maybe not a DH. And if he's a 120 WRC plus hitter, he is a DH. But we had this conversation about Marmolejos last year. It's like positionless. He's just not quite good enough hitter to be a real DH.
I agree with that.
But he doesn't really have a position either. Like we're trying to make him a catcher. If he doesn't work out at catcher, and I have a feeling he won't in a very short period of time. But if he does, great. But if he doesn't, he's a first base DH who's like right there on the fringe of being average.
I think the Mariners know that he needs to be a catcher because they made it such an emphasis this offseason and this spring for him to be catching. I think that if he's not a catcher, then they're probably just going to make him a trade fodder for someone else and say, here, you fix him. Like I can totally see him like, like the Rays love their positionless players. I could totally see him going to the Rays and just like being like a decent role player for them. But, the Mariners need him to be a catcher in order for him to be valuable here.
Mm-hmm. I mean, with robo-umps, it doesn't really matter. He's just got to be able to hose someone at second.
Yeah.
And he did today. So if he can hit, I think the Mariners are kind of right to do what they're doing. Like the Tom Murphys are going to go away if there are robo-umps, which is probably a good thing for the game.
I have such little interest in Tom Murphy being a Mariner. I love him as a person, but just as a player, he's like, he does absolutely nothing for me. Like I see him at the plate and I'm just like falling asleep.
Yeah, he was worth 1 more last year.
Does
that mean that you don't like Eric Haas?
Yes.
The thing with Tom Murphy is that he and Cal are a similar archetype. They are big power, big strikeout, good defense catchers. You really only need one of them.
I think the thought is that Cal would be better than that. I think the hopes for Cal are higher than that.
True. Yes, I would agree with that. Although Tom Murphy's 2019, which admittedly looks like a mirage in hindsight, I'm not going to lie. He had a 3.5 win season. He was the most valuable catcher on a rate basis. And by that, I mean, he was
3.5.
Yeah. He was insane, dude. Insane.
Was that on the Mariners?
He had a 126 WRC plus. Yeah.
Yeah. He was insane.
I kind of remember that. I remember he just pulled everything.
Catcher. Yeah. And his BABIP is sky high. That's the thing. If you look at those numbers, the BABIP sticks out like a sore thumb. He clearly lucked into some of that.
There is still a chance that he can hit, for the record.
Yeah.
I don't believe that to be the case.
I think that's why he's on this roster still, is because of that 2019. Because Dipoto loves his bounce backs.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's because he commands the staff and he's a veteran. I don't know.
Maybe that too.
Well, the thing with guys like Murphy is that it's not that he can or he can't hit. It's that there's variance in the outcomes of that profile, right? It's the same thing we saw with Mike Zunino. And I understand, we just made the joke about not comparing every swingman to, like the one swingman, and not comparing every utility player to Ben Zobrist. And I don't like comparing other catchers to Mike Zunino. But what Mike Zunino has, when you look at his career, is he's always a plus catcher, but it's to very different degrees. And he has years and months and stretches at a time where he's locked in and he's hitting, and he has long stretches where he is swinging through everything. And it's just all over the place. And I think Tom Murphy, and to a slightly lesser degree Cal Raleigh, are of that archetype where they might legitimately be a 3.5 win player one year and below average the next. Like, it's not impossible based on just the fungibility in the archetype. And that sucks, which is why you'd like to have somebody you feel more stable about. But for the record, we can't put Cal in that basket yet because he hasn't played enough. And like you said, we do think he is potentially better than that. For the record, he's Robbie Ray's personal catcher, apparently. I'm of the opinion that the reason he made the team is because Robbie Ray and him hit it off so much. And also Logan Gilbert.
Robbie Ray can have a personal catcher before he's thrown a pitch for this team?
This is what Shannon said. So it was last week.
Who?
We were listening. I guess it was
Murphy?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Cal.
Oh,
Cal.
Okay, that's weird.
Cal is Robbie Ray's personal catcher,
that's
so to
weird.
speak. And they had Terrens catching with Robbie Ray, and I don't know any of the logistics, but he didn't have anything to say, but apparently he came out after a session with Cal and raved about him to Scott, to Shannon, to everyone who asked. He's like, yeah, this is my dude. Love the way he calls the game. Love the relationship we have. Love how he frames stuff. So I'm legitimately of the belief that even over Tom Murphy, Cal Raleigh is the shoe-in to have the most playing time if he plays his way into it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If he's good, he's going
That's
to
so
get the lion's share,
So
whether or not.
So he's going to be playing in the opening day lineup on Thursday.
I mean, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Whether or not he plays the rest of the week, who knows? But yeah, it would very much seem so.
Interesting.
Yes. They kept 3 catchers for a reason, right? Like, if they really weren't going to play him, he wouldn't be on the roster.
Decision.
So.
I think the Mariners needed to decide to cut someone. I think it should have been Murphy, and I just don't think that they were willing to do it.
Raleigh was so bad last year.
Yeah,
they probably would have.
Defense was good.
They probably would have demoted Raleigh if Ray didn't stick up for him.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I think that would have been fine. I mean, if Murphy's going to catch most days and Terrens can every couple days, he can't be. But that's the thing. Raleigh was so bad, and Terrens was not a catcher. For the second half of the season, that's how bad he was at catching. Apparently,
yeah. I would just rather have Billy Hamilton on the team than Tom Murphy. But oh well.
Billy Hamilton's going to catch?
Or
no, but that's the decision.
Kyle Lewis.
Yeah, but Lewis is hurt. What are you going to...
By the way, he's cooked in center field.
Oh, yeah.
Kyle Lewis?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if... Yeah.
I think
they honestly...
The way that Jerry talks about it, he didn't necessarily say so.
I think he's cooked.
In fact, he kind of said otherwise.
I think he's cooked in the field.
He just might only have one knee left.
Yeah.
And that's not a great place to start from. So, all right, let's wrap today on, let's do one more guy, which is, we'll do Matt Festa, because Festa sounds like he has a new pitch and also is replacing Casey Sadler, who is out for the year. So we have Sergio Romo kind of taking that spot, and Matt Festa also made the team today. Mikey, when did Festa actually pitch for the Mariners? It wasn't last year. Was it 2020 or 2019? He's been on this before.
2019, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's changed? What's new, and why should we be excited now? Because he was kind of a prospect even then.
I mean, mostly that he took a gyro slider, which, we've talked a lot about on this podcast. I don't know, necessarily as much recently, but it's kind of a limited pitch. And it can be very good. That's actually what Taylor Williams threw Taylor Williams is very gone. But he took a gyro slider, and now he's throwing more of a sweeping slider, is the way that he phrased it. And I don't know if it's a sweeper, but if he's throwing something with like 10 plus inches of glove side movement in the low 80s, that instantly makes me interested in him. So, I don't have that much to say on him because I haven't seen him pitch, but I kind of tend to think that he's going to get a 2-week kind of trial period, maybe 3, while the starters get built up. And then they'll kind of, whatever happens by that, things change. But I think he's going to be the first person to go, when, say, Kyle Lewis gets called up.
What, before even like
so
Eric
Lewis
Swanson?
will probably up. I kind of think so. I mean, he has options. He has an option. Swanson, I don't know if he does, right? And Swanson was good last year. Like, I'm trying to. I'll have to pull up his numbers.
The only good thing from that Paxton trade at this point,
which is wild. I mean, in fairness, at the time of the trade, Jeff Sullivan was like, I think Eric Swanson is better than Justice Sheffield, or at least he was in the minors. I kind of take it back. I mean, he was 35 innings, 3.31 ERA. That's pretty good. 0.4 WAR is not as good, but yeah. I mean, if we got rid of Eric Swanson, I wouldn't say anything. I would have no thoughts. So yeah, I might send Festa down first, but that's more of a logistical thing.
Durs, last year the Mariners bullpen was incredible, right? Like, just everything else aside, it took a while to shake out to the exact form that it is kind of now, but they really performed well and they floated the team. Do you think they can have similar success to this year?
Okay, so here's my thing. Last year's opening day bullpen was very bad. We were hanging such high hopes on Will Vest. We had really high expectations for Keenan Middleton and Rafael Montero, who were the big 2 acquisitions from the previous offseason. I think Sewald wasn't on the roster, but Steckenrider was, and so was Sadler, but we didn't really think anything of those players at the time. I don't think we can expect Jared Dipoto to like pull 3-star relievers out of his ass like he did with Sadler, Steckenrider, and Sewald this year, but I think this bullpen is really in a better position to start the season than it was last year. And whether that like results in a better bullpen in the aggregate, probably not. But it certainly could result in a bullpen that is still very good. And I think it's still likely to produce a bullpen that's very good.
They are starting with a Paul Sewald and did not have a Paul Sewald at the beginning of last season.
Correct.
So you're right. I don't even know if they had a Drew Steckenrider. I think they
did to start the season, but he was not. Yeah. He was not like Steckenrider.
Yeah. Oh, I started up writing that piece for Gotti and I haven't finished. Anyways, this shit is already going down in terms of the bullpen. Like, Sadler's done for the year.
Hurt.
He was amazing. Giles is done for 2 weeks. Munoz, is he even good? I don't fucking know.
Throws pretty hard.
Steck's probably not going to repeat. Diego Castillo didn't look like himself with the Mariners. There is a route for this to not be a good bullpen.
I think it's like maybe an average bullpen.
There are many.
I don't think it's going to be a bad bullpen. This isn't a bullpen that is relying on guys nobody's heard of, which is, some playoff teams go into the year with bullpens that are just who the hell is this?
I think a lot of it comes down to whether Castillo and Munoz are good.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think Castillo is a big wild card in the bullpen, honestly.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, the thing is, Castillo has been good for years and years and years, and that probably shouldn't change. So
it makes me very uncomfortable that the Rays traded him for Chargois. Very uncomfortable. I don't like that.
I think it was
I don't trust
saving.
the Rays to give us a deal.
I do tend to think it was money saving, but it could be both. And then there's also that, maybe Festa is kind of a Sewald, a second writer,
Oh, don't forget Johan.
especially
Maybe
with that.
Johan
that
has a little
freaking
Paul
slider.
Sewald in him.
I know, and I was gonna mention him, but the difference is that Sewald can command his pitches, and Johan commands his pitches like a guy who has struggled to stay on a roster, which is true. He's struggled to stay on the roster because he's struggled to command his pitches. So I love him. I honestly think he's a carbon copy of Sewald if he can just locate like anywhere near average, and he hasn't. But he did more last year. So
all right. We're at about an hour and a half. Any final thoughts, guys, or should we wrap it here for today?
I'm just really excited for baseball to be back.
I'm so excited. Next time we talk,
Julio,
it will have
opening
been
day.
back.
Next time we talk, the Mariners will be
baby.
2-5, and we'll be like, shit.
I'm glad you said that real
God.
quick, because one thing that goes understated about the Mariners last year is that it might have literally been like a game or two, but they basically never spent any time under 500. They were over 500 in April. They were at 500, even though they played atrociously in May. And then they never looked back. And there is a version of this team where everything works out, even without some of the magic that happened last year, that the team just coasts on some of that success. And if I had to pick one thing I would love, it's initial success for this team. Even if they swoon later, I would like them to start hot and believe in themselves and see that talent realized and then have to keep it. Because I think if they get way behind the 8 ball early, it's going to be a much more grindy season where we're thinking about the bigger picture than whatever's going on in front of us more often.
I do have one thing to say before we go.
Go for it.
Johan Ramirez, stuff plus 121. Location plus on his slider 90. Location plus on his four-seam fastball 88. So yeah, and that was better, I think, than the year before. I would have to look. So just locate.
It's not Kikuchi, where like Kikuchi was really bad at commanding, and then all of a sudden his stuff vanished, and then he got a 3-year deal with Toronto.
His stuff ticked up and his location ticked up a little bit. So maybe he's got one more baby step in him.
I think Kikuchi is the archetype of why I don't buy into anecdotal evidence anymore about specific players. Especially like when we talk about somebody like Torrens, like there's some anecdotal evidence for why he could be better this year. Just stuff outside of baseball. And that was really the book on Kikuchi was, his dad died. He was using a new ball. He was changing leagues. He was playing against different competition, blah,
also,
blah, blah.
like he was changing pitches.
Yeah. But none of it ever made a difference, right? Like his final form and the form he started with were pretty similar in terms of actual results.
I also just realized that unless the Mariners go and sign the recently released Shogo Akiyama, they're going to go into the season without a Japanese player for the first time since 01.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yes.
I bet.
True.
Sign an interpreter.
I bet. Well, no, the interpreter's still there for Ichiro. Anthony Suzuki still needs to be employed for Ichiro. But
just sign Ichiro.
I bet they go. You know what? I bet they go sign Shogo Akiyama.
That'd be so annoying.
Take a minor league deal.
I mean, why not? It's just.
We'll wrap it up there for today. I'm Evan, and you can find me on Twitter at Evan James Audio. You can find Mikey on Twitter at Kuya Mikey. You can find Anders on Twitter at Anders Jorstad. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever it is you stream. Additionally, please support the podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/NeverSunnyInSeattle. I'll also have a link to that in the video at the end of this. Thanks for listening. Go Mariners. Julio debut in 48 hours, so